There's a sound no father should ever wake up to on his own land. The crack of a rifle shot just before sunrise. It tore through the silence like a scream, and before I even opened my eyes, my body was already moving. I threw off the covers, heart hammering so hard I could barely breathe. My bare feet hit the cold wooden floor as I stumbled toward the window. I didn't even know what I expected to see. But nothing could have prepared me for what was out there. 3 men in camo, rifles slung over their shoulders, walking casually across my property like they owned the place. And just beyond them, down by the edge of the field, my son's prize bull, Apollo, was collapsed in the mud, blood spreading under him like spilled oil. "No," I whispered, then shouted, "No!" I didn't stop to think. I grabbed my boots, no socks, jeans barely on, and bolted out the door. My hands were shaking so badly, I nearly dropped my phone trying to call 911. I didn't even get a chance to dial. One of the men looked up and actually smiled. "Relax, buddy," he called out, voice like gravel. "We got permission." I skidded to a stop, breathless, eyes locked on him. "Permission!" I shouted. "From who?" "The HOA lady," another one said, casually pointing behind him with his thumb. "She said this patch was free game." My blood boiled so fast I could feel it in my teeth. I was barely processing what he said when I caught sight of Apollo again. My son's bull, our pride, our family's legacy, still breathing but twitching, legs kicking weakly in the dirt. I dropped to my knees beside him, pressing my hands against the wound. Blood soaked through my palms. His eyes rolled back, then focused, then rolled again. The ground smelled like iron and panic. I looked up. "You sons of—" But the words stuck in my throat. One of them just laughed and said, "It's just a bull, man." Behind me, I heard footsteps pounding the dirt. My son. He didn't say anything at first. He just stood there, frozen, looking down at Apollo. Then he screamed. A sound I'd never heard from him before. Raw. Gut deep. His knees gave out, and he dropped next to me, his hands clumsy, reaching for Apollo's face, whispering, "No, no, no, come on, boy, stay with me." The men just stood there. One leaned on his rifle. Another lit a cigarette. I stood, fists clenched. "You're trespassing. You're armed. You shot our bull. You think this is just going to go away?" The third guy, taller than the others, spit on the ground. "Should have kept that beast fenced. Karen said it was dangerous." Karen. Of course it was Karen. HOA president with a God complex and a serious problem with families that didn't look like hers. My son looked up, face streaked with tears and mud. "Dad, they didn't just shoot him." I turned to him, breathing hard, trying to stay calm. He said it again, quieter this time. "They killed him on purpose." That's when the sirens started wailing in the distance. A promise. Backup was coming. But not fast enough. Before the blood, before the gunshot, before the screaming, there was peace. Our ranch wasn't just land, it was memory. My grandfather built the barn with his own hands. My father laid the fence posts, one by one. And now it was mine to protect. Simple, quiet, real. Apollo wasn't just a bull. He was part of us. My son, Isaiah, raised him from a calf, bottle-fed him, trained him, brushed him every morning before school. That bull followed Isaiah around like a dog. They had a bond that went deeper than anyone could explain. Neighbors would stop by and marvel at how gentle he was. Big, strong, powerful, but calm. Regal, almost. Isaiah would just smile and say, "He listens to me. He trusts me." And Apollo did. Every evening after dinner, The two of them would walk the edge of the property together. That's how much they meant to each other. I remember one morning when Isaiah was sick and didn't come out. Apollo stood at the fence for hours, just waiting. Didn't eat, didn't move, just waited. So when I saw him bleeding in the dirt, I didn't just see a bull. I saw my son's heart breaking in real time. A week before it happened, Karen had shown up again, driving slow, like she was inspecting something, clipboard in hand, her usual routine. She didn't wave, just stared. Karen had always had a problem with us. When we first moved in, she left a note in our mailbox that said, "This community has standards." No name, just the message. She complained about everything. Said our fences were too high. Said the barn was unsightly. She hated the sounds of the animals in the morning. Said the smell drifted into her backyard. But it wasn't just about the ranch. We knew that. We were the only black family in the entire HOA zone, and while our ranch technically sat outside their jurisdiction, it never stopped her from acting like she owned everything in sight. She called Isaiah's friends suspicious when they came by, told the mailman she was concerned about gang activity when my cousins helped mend a broken gate. It was subtle. Always just subtle enough. Until it wasn't. I remember that night, 2 days before the shooting, I saw tire tracks near the back of the field. Fresh. Wide. I hadn't been back there. Neither had Isaiah. I asked Joe, my next-door neighbor, if he'd seen anything strange. Joe just shook his head and muttered, "Karen's been talking like she's gonna fix the problem with your land." Said something about taking action. I brushed it off. That was my mistake. I thought, let her talk. We've got nothing to hide. But people like Karen don't stop at talking. Not when they've got power, and especially not when they think someone like you doesn't deserve to be where you are. And the truth is, I should have seen it coming. The way she looked at us, the way she gritted her teeth when Isaiah and Apollo walked past her place like they belonged here. Because in her world, we never did. And when I think back on that last peaceful night, Isaiah brushing Apollo down, music playing low from the barn, the stars clear above us, I realize now it wasn't just a calm before the storm. It was the last time any of us would feel safe on our own land. The morning felt off before the sun even came up. The kind of stillness that doesn't feel peaceful. Just wrong. Like something was holding its breath. I stepped out onto the porch with my coffee and looked across the fields. That's when I saw it. The back gate was open. I knew damn well I had locked it the night before. I double-checked it every evening before going to bed, same as always. I set the cup down, grabbed my jacket, and started walking toward the south field. The grass was still damp with morning dew. The dirt was soft. That's when I saw the tire tracks, wide, deep, fresh. They cut straight across my property line and led toward the grove where Apollo liked to rest in the early hours. I picked up the pace. Something in my gut screamed at me to move faster. Then I heard the voices, men talking. Not loud, but not whispering either. Confident. Like they belonged there. I pushed through the trees and saw them. 3 white men in full camouflage, holding rifles. One was pointing toward the barn. Another was adjusting his scope. The third was walking straight toward Apollo. Apollo stood there, calm, curious, the way he always was around strangers. Head slightly tilted, ears perked. No fear in him. He didn't know what danger looked like. But I did. I broke into a sprint. "Hey!" I yelled. "Hey! Get away from him!" They looked up. One of them, tall, with mirrored sunglasses, didn't even flinch. He just raised his rifle like he was adjusting it. That's when I saw Apollo turn his head toward me. For a second, everything froze. Then the man pulled the trigger. The crack of the rifle echoed like thunder. Apollo let out a low, broken bellow and staggered. I screamed so loud it tore something in my chest. I dropped to my knees as he collapsed, legs folding under him like he'd been struck by lightning. Blood started pooling in the grass beneath his shoulder. I ran to him, my hands already out, already useless. I pressed down, trying to stop the bleeding, trying to do something, anything. His breath came in shallow gasps. His eyes were wild with pain. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Isaiah. "No!" he screamed. "No, no, no!" He dropped beside me, grabbing at Apollo's face. "Stay with me, boy. Stay with me." One of the men laughed. "What's the big deal? It's just a bull." I turned, shaking. "What the hell is wrong with you? Who told you you could be here?" The one in sunglasses shrugged. "Karen said this was hunting land. Said the big one was aggressive." I stared at him, trying to process the words. Karen? Of course. Who else? Isaiah was crying now, openly, holding Apollo's head in his lap. Blood soaked through his jeans. "He was mine," Isaiah choked. "He was mine." The man with the cigarette chuckled. "Should have put a leash on him." I stood, fists clenched so tight I felt my nails cutting into my palms. "You're trespassing. You're armed. You just shot a registered show bull. On private land." The heavy-set one looked nervous. "Hey, man, don't make this a thing. We thought it was allowed." Isaiah stood, trembling. "Don't make this a thing? You walked onto our land. You aimed at him. You shot him." The man in sunglasses leaned on his rifle. "Calm down, son. Ain't like we shot you." I grabbed Isaiah's arm before he lunged, and that's when I saw it clearly. This wasn't an accident. They didn't shoot Apollo because they were scared. They shot him because he belonged to us. Because we didn't look like them. Because we dared to build something beautiful here. Isaiah looked at me, his voice shaking but steady. "They didn't come to hunt deer, Dad. They came to send a message." And he was right. This wasn't about a bull. This was about who had the right to be here, to own this land, to belong. And according to them, we never did. A white SUV pulled into the driveway, like it owned the place. Karen. She stepped out, wearing her usual crisp white blouse, sunglasses too big for her face, and that damn clipboard clutched like it was a badge of power. She didn't even look surprised to see the blood, or Apollo writhing in pain. She looked annoyed. "What is all this about?" she called out, voice sugary and sharp. "Is someone hurt?" I didn't answer. I couldn't. Isaiah stood, fists clenched, eyes locked on her like he was seeing the devil herself. Karen looked around like she was inspecting weeds, not a crime scene. These gentlemen were told they had permission. I don't understand the hostility. "You don't understand?" I stepped forward, jaw tight. "You told strangers they could bring guns onto my land. And now, my son's bull is dying in the dirt." She waved her hand. "Oh, come on. It's not like it was a child." Isaiah's voice cracked. "He was family." Karen scoffed. "You people get so emotional." That was it. That line cut deeper than the bullet. I took one step toward her before Isaiah grabbed my arm. "Not here, Dad. Let them see who the real animals are." I looked down. Apollo's chest barely moved. Behind us, The flashing red and blue lights finally arrived. Sheriff's Deputy Miller stepped out of the cruiser. Young guy, maybe late 20s, but sharp. His eyes scanned the scene fast. Blood, guns, 3 camo-clad men looking suddenly less confident. He walked straight up to me. "Sir, what happened here?" I pointed. "They came onto my property and shot that bull. Said they had permission from the HOA. He turned to the men. "Is that true?" The heavy one nodded quickly. "The lady, Karen. She said it was fine. Gave us a map and everything." Karen stepped forward like she was still in charge. "Deputy, they were simply thinning the herd. We've had complaints about that animal before. It's aggressive." I pulled out my phone, opened the photos. This bull has won 5 county fair awards. He's tagged, registered, and this is private land, outside of the HOA. Miller took the phone, scanned the images, and nodded slowly. "Ma'am," he said, turning to Karen, "do you have any legal authority over this land?" Karen lifted her chin. "I'm the HOA president." "That's not what I asked." She blinked. "Well, no, but—" "Then you have no right to authorize anyone to step foot on his property, especially with firearms." Karen's fake concern began to crumble. But I was trying to help the community. I stepped forward. "By sending armed men to shoot what doesn't belong to you?" Miller looked at the hunters. "Did any of you see a no trespassing sign?" The tall one in sunglasses muttered, "Yeah. Red letters. Big. Didn't think it mattered." Miller shook his head. "It matters." That's when the vet arrived. Doc Harris. Dust-covered truck. Jumpy little assistant in the passenger seat. He didn't waste time. Dropped his bag, ran to Apollo, dropped to his knees. He looked up at me. "It's bad, but if he makes it through the next 24 hours, he's got a shot." Isaiah knelt again beside Apollo, whispering softly, brushing his coat. I saw his hand shaking. I turned to Karen. "You did this." She didn't answer, just crossed her arms and looked away. Miller took a long breath. "I'm going to need statements from everyone, and we'll need to look into that permission slip." The heavyset hunter fished it out of his pocket, a crumpled sheet with a fake HOA letterhead, Karen's name scribbled across it. Miller took it without a word. He looked at me. "You got property records?" I nodded. "County certified. Been saving them for a day like this." Karen's voice wavered. "I was only trying to help." Miller didn't look up. "Ma'am, you may have just crossed into felony territory." Karen's face turned pale, and for the first time since this nightmare started, she looked afraid. Sheriff Danvers showed up just before noon. He was old school. Wide frame, pressed uniform, mustache like he carved it with a knife. He'd seen enough trouble in this town to know real damage when he saw it. And the moment he laid eyes on Apollo, bleeding in the dirt, something shifted in his face. He didn't ask a lot of questions. He just walked up to Deputy Miller, took the crumpled permit from his hand, and stared at it. "Who gave them this?" Miller nodded toward Karen. She adjusted her sunglasses and cleared her throat like she was still in charge. "I was operating under the assumption that the land—" Danvers cut her off. "Ma'am, don't dance. Did you give these men permission to enter this man's land with firearms?" She blinked. "Well, yes. But I thought—" "That's all I needed to hear." He turned to me. "Sir, I'm going to need copies of your property lines, the official records." I already had them, pulled them out of a folder I kept in the kitchen drawer. I handed them over, stamped, signed, sealed from the county office. Danvers flipped through the pages, jaw tightening with every line. Then he looked up. This property has never been under HOA control. I nodded. And she knew that. Karen's voice sharpened. This is all a misunderstanding. I was simply acting in the community's best interest. Danvers took a long breath. Eyes narrowed. You don't get to forge documents and authorize armed entry on someone else's land in the name of best interest. This isn't your kingdom. One of the hunters spoke up then, voice shaky. We didn't know, Sheriff. She said the bull was wild, said it was endangering the neighborhood. I stared at him. And you believed that, without even knocking on my door? He looked away. Danvers stepped back and radioed in for backup. We've got potential criminal trespass, forgery, and animal cruelty. Secure the scene. Separate witnesses. Karen's face cracked. The smugness drained from her eyes. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Isaiah stood nearby, arms folded tight across his chest, his eyes never leaving her. Later that day, the local news station caught wind of the story. A van rolled up the gravel driveway, with a reporter already halfway rehearsing her lines. I didn't speak to them. Not yet. I didn't want this to be about a soundbite. I wanted facts, proof, and justice. So I went to the only person I trusted with my side of the story, Joe. Joe had been my neighbor for 10 years. White, old school, no nonsense. He drank his coffee black and his opinions stronger. And most importantly, he'd been there that week. He'd seen Karen circling our land. He'd heard what she said at the HOA meeting. When I asked him if he'd speak up, he didn't even hesitate. Hell yes, he said, spitting tobacco into the dirt. I've had enough of that woman's games. With Joe's statement, the forged permit, the hunter's testimony, and my property documents, all the pieces started clicking into place. But I still wasn't satisfied. So I checked the trail cams. A while back, I'd installed hidden cameras all around the property, after a string of thefts. They were tucked into fence posts, mounted under birdhouses, hidden in plain sight. And when I pulled the footage, there she was, Karen. Wearing that ridiculous floral jacket, standing with the hunters near the south gate, laughing, pointing, handing them a folded map and saying, clear as day. Don't worry about the guy, he never pays attention. Just do it early. I watched it 3 times. Then I drove straight to the sheriff's office and dropped the flash drive on Danvers's desk. He plugged it in, watched it silently, and when it ended, leaned back with a whistle. Well, damn, he said. She really thought she'd get away with it. I nodded. Not this time. Danvers looked at me, eyes steady. Between this footage, the fake permit, and Joe's witness statement, you've got more than enough to press felony charges. And I plan to, I said. But it wasn't just about charges anymore. This had to be public, loud, permanent. Not just for me, not just for Apollo. For every person who'd been told they didn't belong. For every black family that had been targeted, silenced, ignored. Karen thought this was over. But I was just getting started. The courtroom was packed. People filled every bench. Some I knew, some I didn't. Neighbors who had never spoken to us now sat quietly, waiting to see what would happen. The story had spread far. HOA president authorizes armed hunters, shoots black teens prize bull. And they all came to see if the system would finally do something right. Karen sat at the defendant's table, face painted with too much makeup, lips tight, like she was holding in a scream. Her lawyer sat beside her, flipping pages, whispering furiously into her ear. She kept nodding like a puppet with a string wound too tight. On our side, my lawyer sat calm. Documents stacked neatly. A flash drive labeled trail cam footage. Joe sat behind us, hands folded, ready. Isaiah sat beside me, his hands clenched into fists, the pain in his eyes still fresh. The judge entered, a woman with silver hair and zero patience. She took one look at the room and said, "Let's keep this focused." The first 30 minutes were all evidence. They played the footage from our cameras. Karen handing over the map. Karen telling the hunters to ignore the guy who never pays attention. Karen laughing. Dead silence in the courtroom. Then came the fake permit, signed by Karen, stamped with a forged logo. The judge's eyebrows lifted slightly. Was this submitted to any official board? Karen's lawyer stammered, "It was a community initiative." The judge cut in, "Community initiatives don't involve unauthorized firearms on private property." Next came the vet bills, Apollo's emergency care, the photos of Isaiah covered in blood, holding Apollo's head. Joe's testimony, clear and steady. She said she'd deal with them, once and for all. Then it was time for Isaiah. He stood, walked to the front, hands shaking slightly. He looked straight at the judge. "My bull was more than just an animal," he said. "I raised him since he was small enough to fit in my lap. He trusted me, and I trusted this place would keep him safe. But Karen didn't see us as neighbors. She saw us as a problem." His voice cracked. "They didn't just shoot him. They came here looking for something to hurt. And they picked him because they couldn't touch us." The courtroom was silent. Karen's lawyer didn't object. He couldn't. When it was Karen's turn to speak, she stood slowly, gripping the podium like it might save her from drowning. "I only ever wanted to help this neighborhood," she said, voice trembling. "There were complaints. People were scared. That animal was huge and aggressive. I thought I was doing the right thing." The judge's gavel hit hard. "You thought? You authorized armed strangers onto a black family's land without consent. You forged a document. You crossed the line between authority and criminal conspiracy." Karen blinked rapidly, her voice breaking. "I didn't mean—" The judge cut her off. "Intent doesn't erase consequence." She paused, then said, "Guilty. On all counts." Karen gasped. A sound left her like air escaping a balloon. Her lawyer dropped his pen and just stared at the floor. The judge continued, "You are to pay $250,000 in damages, legal fees, and restitution. You are barred from holding any HOA or neighborhood position for a minimum of 10 years. A restraining order will prevent you from coming within 200 yards of the plaintiff's property." Karen started sobbing. But the judge wasn't done. "You will also serve 6 months probation and complete 400 hours of community service at the county animal shelter." The gasp from the room was real. Karen, the woman who had called animals disgusting and our ranch a biohazard, was now sentenced to clean kennels and care for strays. Outside the courtroom, reporters swarmed. They asked me how I felt. I kept it short. We just wanted to be left alone. We wanted to raise our son, take care of our animals, and live in peace. Now, maybe we finally can. Karen was escorted out the side door, hiding her face behind a folder. It didn't work. By sundown, every news station had plastered her crying mug across their screens. Headlines read, HOA Karen found guilty in racist ranch scandal. Justice for Apollo. Back home, the energy had shifted. Neighbors we barely knew brought food. Kids knocked on the door just to say, sorry. Even old man Simmons from 2 houses down walked over and shook my hand. Didn't know she'd go that far, he said, but I'm glad someone finally stopped her. Isaiah spent the afternoon brushing Apollo's coat, now stitched and healing. The big bull was still limping, but he stood, strong, proud. That night, I sat on the porch with my coffee, and for the first time in months, the stars didn't feel so far away. The courthouse was empty by the time I made it back to the ranch. The morning fog had started to lift, and the sun was already beginning its climb into the sky, golden light breaking through the clouds. I had hoped the weight of the court's decision would settle, but the truth was, it only felt like a small part of the fight was done. The real victory wasn't in the judge's ruling or Karen's punishment. It was in the moment I finally realized that we could take back control of our land, our lives. Karen was gone now, but it didn't matter. The damage she'd done wasn't something that could be erased with a fine or a lawsuit. It was a wound in the community, a wound that would take years to heal. But healing had already begun. The community garden Joe and the neighbors had started began to take shape. Fresh flowers bloomed, vegetables began to sprout from the soil. The once quiet neighborhood was now alive again, buzzing with activity. People who had been too scared to speak up before, now coming forward. I watched from the porch as families walked through the garden, kids laughing and playing in the sunshine. That evening, Isaiah came outside, his face full of pride. He was holding a lead, and beside him, limping but determined, was Apollo. We'd made it. Together. Even if it had taken everything we had. Isaiah stopped at the fence and looked out across the field. "Dad," he said quietly, "I think he's gonna make it." I smiled, a weight lifting off my chest. He's a fighter, just like his owner. Isaiah didn't need to say anything else. We both knew it wasn't just Apollo who had fought for survival. It was all of us. We'd been tested, broken, torn apart, but we didn't give up. The land was ours. The animals were ours. And no one, not even Karen, could take that from us again. That night, as I sat on the porch watching the stars, I heard Apollo's low bellow in the distance, a proud, strong sound, the kind that let you know he was alive, fighting back just like the rest of us. The ranch felt different now, alive with a new sense of purpose. I didn't have to prove anything to Karen or to anyone else. I wasn't just standing my ground anymore. I was rebuilding, stronger than before. The next morning, I went down to the local fairgrounds with Isaiah. It wasn't just to show Apollo off. It was to show the world that they hadn't won. As we entered the show ring, the crowd buzzed with excitement, murmuring when they recognized Apollo. He wasn't the same bull he used to be, not yet, but he was standing tall, proud, ready to face whatever came next. When the judges called out the winner, I saw it, the recognition, the respect. "This is the bull that almost didn't make it," they whispered. And then, when Apollo's name was called, the applause was deafening. Isaiah walked Apollo up to the podium, the crowd cheering behind us. I saw the tears in his eyes as he held the ribbon high, the same tears he'd had the day he first met Apollo, but now they were different, proud, full of strength. Karen's reign was over. Her lies were exposed. But more than that, we had won not because of the court case, or the money, or the lawsuit, but because we had stayed true to ourselves. We had stood firm in the face of injustice, and we had come out stronger than ever. As we left the fairgrounds, I felt a deep sense of peace, something I hadn't felt in years. The fight wasn't over, but we had made it through the hardest part, and that was something no one could ever take away from us. By the time we got home, the air had cooled, and the ranch was quiet again. The fields stretched out before us, wide, open, and free. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I could breathe again. I sat on the porch, watching the sun set, knowing that no matter what came next, we were ready. We'd fought for what was right, and we had won. As night fell and the stars came out, I heard Apollo's low snort again, his heavy footsteps crunching in the grass. He was alive, and so were we. And that, right there, was the sweetest kind of justice. End of story. This is where it all comes full circle. From loss to redemption. From pain to strength.